When you've reached some personal goal in your life, you realize that this moment only lasts for a few moments. You're right on to the next thing in your life. You don't even stop to be happy and enjoy what's truly going on in that moment. This is the pursuit of happiness. It's this endless cycle of obtaining more, wanting more, getting more of what that thing is, and then moving right on to the next thing right afterwards. So this got me thinking, what is truly enough in our lives? What is the point that you can call it quits? You can stop hustling, you can stop working so hard and just enjoy whatever you have in your life at that point. And what does it take to be truly satisfied in this life? It can't be that hard, can it? There's 4 steps to this, but first I want to talk about why expectations are everything. I heard on a podcast recently that featured Tim Ferriss, happiness is the difference between expectation and reality. The truth is that most people have crazy expectations for themselves, and this leads to their unhappiness. Overall, it can really pigeonhole our success if we have these crazy expectations that aren't in line with reality of how things really unfold. Realistically then, if our expectations are lower, our happiness will go up. But if our expectations are high, our happiness is likely to stay low because it's less likely we'll be satisfied with whatever outcome ends up happening. Now, the key part to distinguish here is that I'm not saying to not set ambitious goals. Your expectations should not align with how crazy those goals are. What's really cool about keeping low expectations is that when there's a setback or something that happens in your life, you're not overly discouraged by it and can keep moving forward. If you have this high expectation, for example, that you're going to earn $1 million in the next year, and then you have this setback that makes you bankrupt, you're going to be in the trenches, you're going to be depressed. But if you had the expectation that you might make $50,000, you might make $100,000, you might make $0, this will be much more aligned with your expectations and your mood won't suffer as greatly. It's also very clear, and I've done a video about this before, that the idea of enough does not exist because we live in a consumerism world that depends 100% on materialistic goods. Have you ever thought about how there's never this idea of finding too much laughter or having too much fun with friends or just having too much of a good time with your family? Exactly. That's because happiness is intrinsic in those things, but materialistic goods make us need more and more because they don't truly bring us happiness. You always want to have that better house or bigger house than your friends or your neighbors. You always want that faster car to show off to people, and you always want the newest, greatest, and latest gadgets to show off and let everyone know that you're doing better than they are. These ideas of greed and status really take us for a trip, and we kind of start to lose our sense of self in the midst of this. And when it comes down to it, it's only our greed and our insecurity when it comes to money and finances that really is driving this need. And a quote from Mad Men that I really like, it's a really good show if you guys haven't checked it out, but it's that happiness is the point right before you need more happiness.
Advertising is based on one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay.
The first way to really find your sense of enough is by simply spending time away. Since you're very caught up with society like I am, you need to take the idea of detoxing to heart because it's at the core of everything we do these days. Take a detox time to get rid of the herd mentality and to really start thinking on your own terms. Take the time wherever you go to journal, to think, to get your thoughts in order, to really think about the life you want to create and what kind of person you want to become. So this can be physical distancing, but you can also even do this in a bedroom where you're away from other people and unhinge from societal norms. That's kind of the most important thing here. You need to spend enough time away from everyone else who's constantly hustling and going crazy and just kind of find yourself in the madness. I really found this to be true at my parents' farm because they live in such a rural area that I can really just get to the roots of who I really am and get to those core values. The second thing is to determine what's really enough for you as an individual. It's tailored to you. It's about you, not about everybody else. And let's be honest, you heard the word enough a couple of moments ago, or you saw it in the title or in the thumbnail, and you pretended to know what it meant. You're like, oh, enough, I know what that is. But that's not true. You kind of took it as a proxy for something that doesn't really exist in your mind yet. It's something you have to figure out by yourself. It's something that comes with time as you figure out who you really are. It's also not a one-size-fits-all gig here. What's enough for you may not be enough for somebody else. That's completely fine and exactly why you need to figure out what is enough for you. This counts for both material things, but also things that are just inherent to life and bring you happiness. It can be anything from how many cars you want, or what kind of cars you want, which houses you want, but also how much time you want to spend with family, how much time you want by yourself, what you want to end up doing with all your money, how much money do you really need, how much do you want to invest, how much do you want to go on vacation. It's all these different aspects of our life that bring us happiness. So do you want to worry about not having to pay your bills and you just want to have that on autopilot? Is that your idea of enough, or is it to own a super yacht like Jeff Bezos, where that can be considered enough for you? Something really cool happened when I was visiting my parents just a few weeks ago. As I mentioned, they live on a farm out in Alberta. It's a very rural area, about an hour and a half from the nearest city and about 30 minutes from the nearest grocery store. This place is in the middle of nowhere. I love that about it because I live in such a busy city. So when I go out there, I am able to just reset and really find myself. On the second last night I was there, I decided to go outside and go for a night walk with our orange dog, which we adopted from the Caribbean. As I was walking down, I stared up at the sky and saw hundreds of thousands of stars forming the Milky Way. I saw a shooting star. I saw all these beautiful twinkling lights in the sky with no light pollution around. I started to feel a bit uneasy. I didn't know what it was at first. I stood there, looked around, really took in the moment, and I realized silence. It was the immense silence, that ringing in your ears. As I stood there, I realized that none of my to-do lists were popping up. I wasn't thinking about what my next move was gonna be. I wasn't worried about tomorrow. I wasn't in my head and thinking thoughts like I normally did. I was simply enjoying that moment. And as I stood there looking at the stars, I realized that moment was enough. I stood there looking at those stars and a smile just formed across my face. It was the happiest I'd been in a long time. Just seeing those stars, having that silence, and just that time to be myself really allowed me to feel like that moment was enough. I'll be chasing that for the rest of my life, that feeling that that moment gave me and the serenity of nature. So that's all I need. Peace, serenity, being surrounded by stars and nature, some silence, and being around people that love me. That's my version of enough. So find this silent, starry sky version of your enough and start to think about what you want present in your everyday life that you'd want in your daily life until the day you die. The third thing is that it also draws a parallel, very interestingly, with minimalism. If you really break down what minimalism is and what it stands for, it's all about the idea of breaking everything down that you own into the most essential items, getting rid of the rest. It's not about accumulating more. It's accumulating those things that matter the most to you and having the least amount of it as possible. Honestly, this is a perfect analogy for what enough should be. It's the idea that you want to keep the essential things in your life, the things that matter most to you in your heart. Everything else that's just arbitrary and doesn't matter, get rid of it because it doesn't matter. Treat your life like a minimalist project. Act like you're going through your closet. Minimalize clutter and maximize your satisfaction. Gratitude is also so important. As much as this is mentioned in self-development, it really is a core pillar for figuring out what is enough. It's also a combination of knowing what enough is and that minimalism component we just talked about. That's because if you're grateful for what you already have, the experiences you've had, the friends you have, you can start to realize that this might be enough just as it is. I know I've recently come to this conclusion myself. I've looked around and been like, oh my goodness, look what I already have here. Look at the friends I have. Look at the girlfriend I have. Look at the car I have. Look at the house I live in. And everything is just so much brighter if you think of it in the mindset of being grateful. So if you can even take 5 or 10 minutes on your commute in the morning or first thing in the morning when you wake up and think about how grateful you are and make a little mind list, or even jot it down in your journal or write it down in notes or whatever, you'll see that this quickly helps you figure out what enough means to you. Those are the 4 steps to figuring out what is enough for you. The first is to schedule time away. The second is to take time to figure out what enough really means for you. The third is to use the principles of minimalism to get rid of clutter and to maximize satisfaction. And last of all is to utilize gratitude to figure out what you already have that'll bring you to that enough mindset to figure out what's missing and what you could really use to improve your quality of life. So that, my friends, is the key to unlocking what's enough for you, and hopefully it's a little bit less than you think once you start thinking about it a little bit. I know for me that was definitely the case. I thought I needed all these things, but in reality it's a lot less than I thought it was going to be. So thanks so much for watching, and check this one out if you haven't already.